Hey everyone, and welcome to skillcapped's tier list and rundown for patch 10.11. This patch is absolutely massive, with meta-changing buffs hitting the entirety of bot lane. Things are definitely being shaken up on top of the fact that the new Volibear rework is going live. That's not even including nerfs to some of the top picks in other roles, and some buffs that will definitely be sending a couple of champions into overpowered territory. This is definitely one of League's most important patches this year, so you don't want to miss it. This patch also got us thinking. League has gone through a lot of different metas over the years. We've had tank metas, roaming mid laners, scaling protect the AD carry compositions, assassins, the list goes on. It got us wondering, what was your guys' favorite meta in League? Let us know in the comment section below, as we're really interested in what the majority of you like. And while you're down there, make sure to subscribe, like, and hit the bell icon to keep up to date with the latest strategies and start taking your game to the next level. Anyway, starting with the brand new Volibear rework going live this patch. His old passive that gave him regeneration when dropping below 30% of his maximum health is now being replaced by, well, essentially his ultimate. He now gains attack speed whenever he deals damage, which stacks up to 5 times, and at 5 stacks, they will ignite with lightning, causing his basic attacks to do bonus magic damage to the 5 closest enemies. It goes without saying that this is a massive buff compared to his old passive. His Q ability is staying almost the same, granting him bonus movement speed. However, his next attack will now stun a target for 1 second instead of flipping them over his head. It also has a few quality of life buffs, with it now granting him the ability to move through units, and if an enemy immobilizes him before he stuns a target, he will become enraged, resetting his Q ability and cooldown, which is crazy valuable. It will do slightly less damage than before and be on a slightly longer cooldown, but our experts agree overall that his new Q is stronger than his old one. His new W ability is really what's insane though. With only a 5-second cooldown, Volibear will maul an enemy dealing damage, part of which scales off his bonus health and applies wounding to the target for 8 seconds. If his W is used again on a wounded target, its damage is increased by 50% and he restores a flat amount of health along with a percentage of his missing health. And this is kind of insane. It's on a low cooldown so it can be spammed, it scales off of his health so that he can build tanky, and it heals based on his missing health so he can have crazy sustain. Once again, our experts consider this a buff over his old W. Volibear's new E ability is actually a skill shot that summons a lightning bolt at a target location. It does similar damage to his old E ability, but is ranged, and get this, if Volibear is inside the blast zone, he will gain a shield equal to 15% of his maximum health. Yeah, once again, definitely a buff over his old ability. Lastly, his ultimate will transform Volibear and leap him towards a target location, gaining flat health, 50 attack range, and the ability to move through units for 12 seconds. Upon landing, enemy towers are disabled for 2 to 6 seconds based on his level and take a chunk of damage. Nearby enemies are slowed by 50%, decaying over 1 second, and enemies directly underneath Volibear will suffer a massive burst of physical damage. Okay, so yeah, by now you've probably realized that the new Volibear is pretty much better in every single way than the old one. If this wasn't enough already, they've actually given him crazy AP ratios on all of his abilities. To put this into perspective, the old Volibear only had 1.0 AP ratio on his kit. The new Volibear has a total AP ratio of 2.45 on his kit. That's more than a lot of mid laners, so don't be surprised if you see AP Volibear running at you. Okay, but the real question is just how strong is the new reworked Volibear? Of course, this is very hard to predict, but our experts are in agreement that he will at least be A tier in top and jungle. However, this is a conservative estimate, and many were thinking that he could be stronger. Either way, we all know that even if Volibear is weak, he will get the riot treatment and receive buffs until he's top tier, as is always the case with reworked champs. So, if his kit looks like something that you'd enjoy playing, then definitely pick him up. He has a lot of potential. Rolling forward, we have the sweeping changes to AD carries. Riot is buffing Zeal and its respective upgrades having the movement speed they give increased by 2% while keeping the price the same. They're also giving a ton of AD carries a buff to their health pool, having their base HP increased by 30 and HP per level by 2, totaling an extra 66 health at level 18. These two stat buffs equate to an extra 200 gold worth of stats, so it's definitely not a massive buff, but it's not nothing either. Where our experts think the truly insane buffs come in are the scaling buffs to 4 specific AD carries. Lucian is having his passive second auto crit damage bonus increased by 75% to 100%. Keep in mind that a lot of Lucian players have been going with a more crit centered build, picking up Essence Reaver, Phantom Dancer, and Infinity Edge, so we can start to see how a 25% increase to damage his crits do is actually pretty huge. Then we have Kalista, who is having her W passive auto attack damage increased from 10 to 18 to 14 to 18% of the opponent's max HP. They're also reducing her W mana cost from 20 to 0. And this is actually one of the craziest buffs, as when Kalista has been top tier in the past, it's mainly because her W passive damage was too high. Also, it was just a few patches ago that Kalista was dominating the top lane. With her now having more max health damage, we could definitely see the potential of her returning back to the top lane where a lot of health stacking occurs. Now, if this wasn't crazy enough, Vayne is having her Q bonus AD ratio increase from 50 to 70 to 60 to 80%. Vayne has already been on the rise, sitting in S tier, so these could be enough to push her into overpowered territory. However, do keep in mind that currently Vayne's meta build involves a lot of attack speed with Blade of the Ruined King, Rage Blade, and Phantom Dancer being staples, so that bonus AD ratio won't impact her as much unless her meta build path changes. Lastly, we have a buff to Tristana, having her attack speed ratio increased from 0.656 to 0.679. Now, I know this may not seem that big to some of you, but you have to keep in mind that Tristana's Q ability increases her bonus attack speed by a massive percentage. This makes the flat attack speed bonus way bigger than at first glance, since when her Q is maxed, that extra flat attack speed gets more than doubled. If all of those buffs weren't enough, Caixa is having her Q bonus AD ratio increase from 35 to 40%, and her ultimate range increased from 1500 to 2500 to 1500 to 3000. What's insane about these Caixa buffs is that she's one of the AD carries having her base health increased, so she's essentially getting double buffed this patch. Overall, ADCs will be looking much stronger, and if you want to know how this changes their positions on the tier list, don't worry, we'll be breaking it down into more detail later on this guide. Alright, heading to the island that is top lane, we have a buff to Gangplank. He's having his attack speed ratio increase from 0.658 to 0.69. This is honestly one of the weirder buffs that we've seen. On one hand, from a raw stat perspective, this buff is massive. This gives Gangplank more base attack speed than almost every champion in the game. On the other hand, Gangplank is all about spamming his Q and landing his abilities, not necessarily standing in melee range auto-attacking enemies as fast as he can. If this was a champion like Tryndamere, then these buffs would shoot him into the S tier, but with Gangplank not exactly scaling with attack speed, we'll be keeping him at the top of the A tier on the cusp of S tier for now. Now, one other important change to realize with top lane is how the AD carry buffs we previously mentioned could actually impact the meta here. For the last few patches, we've seen a rise in range top laners like Vayne and Lucian, and it wasn't all that long ago that Kalista and Tristana were also dominating the top lane. Now, all four of those champions have received buffs, and this will definitely indirectly buff them in top lane as well. So definitely be on the lookout for an increase of these four champions picked in top. Jumping into the tier list, we can see quite a few changes. It looks like the nerfs to Maokai and Kled were much stronger than anticipated last patch, as both had their win rates drop by 2% respectively. You'll notice Darius has ascended back into the OP category, and this more has to do with the other top champions, specifically Maokai and Kled, getting nerfs last patch, giving him room to rise. One notable pick to be on the lookout for is Quinn, who's second place in the S tier. Ever since the buffs to her core first item in top lane, Sanguine Blade, we've seen her win rate increase from 50 to 53% in the top lane. Another unorthodox champion to be paying attention to is Cassiopeia. She's sporting one of the highest win rates in top lane at 53%, while also having one of the highest win rates for players that master her at 59%. With so many nerfs in the past few months to the best top laners, it seems that the state of top is a bit fragile with a lot of room for new picks to rise. Typically when this is the case, counter picks start to become much more powerful as no singular champion outshines the rest. Wait, did I just say no champion outshines the rest? That's not exactly true, with Wukong still keeping his seat on the throne as the king of top lane. We have no idea why he didn't receive nerfs this patch. He has the highest average win rate at 54% and the highest win rate on players that master him at 60%. Seriously, if Wukong is open and you're not picking him up for freelo, then you're missing out. Alright, for our low elo recommendations this patch we have Tryndamere, Jax, Maokai, and Hecarim. Tryndamere and Jax still remain S tier picks in all elos, but are god tier 1v9 carries in the lower elo brackets. Whereas Maokai is the safe, more beginner friendly pick that prevents you from losing lane too hard, and you're always useful throughout the entire game regardless of your performance in lane. We now recommend Hecarim because he has a ton of kill pressure in lane, he's super easy to play, and scales well into the late game. For bans, we recommend Wukong, Darius, and Fiora. These three champions are not only the strongest picks on the patch, but also have the highest pick rates, so are must bans for any top laner. Sweeping into the jungle, we have a very interesting change to Fiddlesticks. While posing as an effigy, he will now terrify enemies when casting his next ability. He's also having his W damage to minions increase from 40 to 60%. This specific change to his effigy is way bigger than people realize. You see, Fiddlesticks already has a passive on his Q ability that will fear opponents on his next spellcast. However, he needs to be out of combat for at least 2.5 seconds and unseen by enemy champions. Keep in mind, being counted as out of combat takes at least 5 seconds, so when fighting an opponent, it would take you 7.5 seconds and being unseen by them for you to have your next ability fear the opponent. However, it only takes Fiddlesticks 1 second of standing still to turn himself into an effigy. This now gives Fiddlesticks the ability to run into a brush during a fight, stand still for 1 second, and have his next ability fear the opponent, which is huge. And he was already topping the charts prior to this buff with an average win rate of 53% and 59% for players that master him. We definitely think these buffs are enough to push him into the overpowered category for jungle. We're also seeing another buff this patch, this time to Hecarim. He's having his Q damage increased from 55 to 215 to 60 to 228. However, he's having his Q damage to minions lowered by 6%. This is a huge buff to Hecarim jungle, while a slight nerf to Hecarim top lane. You have to realize that Hecarim spams his Q when both fighting and clearing his camps, so any damage buff to his Q ability should be multiplied by 3 to really see its true increase. His Q is also what he maxes first, so having a flat 5 damage increase at rank 1 and 13 flat damage at rank 5 is massive. We're confident that this will place him at the top of the A tier, but don't be surprised if you spot a couple more Hecarim mains creeping towards Grandmaster or Challenger on the ladder. Graves is receiving a nerf this patch, and it's a pretty big one. His initial Q damage is having its base AD ratio lowered from 100 to 80%. 20% off the ratio of his main damaging ability is no joke and will definitely drop him out of the overpowered category, so we'll be lowering him into the S tier for this patch. Heading into the tier list, a new meta is really starting to cement itself after the jungle XP changes not too long ago. In the OP tier, we have some familiar faces with Wukong, Fiddlesticks, Zac, Kayn, and Olaf. However, you'll find a lot of champions have dropped down this patch. Graves, Karthus, and Nunu have been lowered into the S tier. At the same time though, we're seeing a resurgence in the staple aggressive picks of Elise, Rek'Sai, and Lee Sin. Two new picks that are gaining a lot of momentum are Evelyn and Kindred. Evelyn received a buff to her Q damage on patch 10.8, and ever since then, her win rate has been climbing and is currently sitting at 51%, with players that master her averaging a 59% win rate. Kindred also received buffs on patch 10.6, and her win rates have climbed to the exact same spot, 51% for average players and 59% that master her. Our low elo recommendations this patch are Warwick, Kayn, Graves, and Volibear. Warwick is not only a strong champion, but is very beginner friendly and great to play when trying to learn the role of jungle. Whereas Kayn and Graves represent the scaling 1v9 hard carry champions that you can use to climb out of lower elo. Volibear outduels almost every other jungler in the early game and still scales tremendously well. That combined with everyone you meet having no idea how he works, you're sure to pick up some free LP. For bans, we recommend Wukong, Kayn, and Fiddlesticks. These are 3 of the most powerful champions on this patch, with Wukong and Kayn having some of the highest pick rates as well. We added in Fiddlesticks since we're predicting a lot of players will be catching on to just how strong he is this patch and be looking to play him. Roaming into the mid lane changes, we have a fascinating buff to Lux, with her E slow duration after hitting detonation being increased from 0.25 to 1 second. This is actually pretty big for both mid lane Lux and support Lux, as now after you tag someone with your E, they will be slowed for an extra 0.75 seconds, which can then be a great help for kiting back, chasing them down, or setting up your bind. Still, we don't think it will be enough to push her past the B tier for the average player, but any Lux mains out there that have mastered her will definitely feel this buff. Talon is also receiving a nerf this patch, with its Q mana cost being increased by 10 and its Q healing on kill being lowered by a flat 10 at level 1. This is definitely aimed at his ability to sustain through poke damage in lane. There's no doubt that this will make him weaker, but the real question is, will it make him weak enough to drop him out of the OP category? And our experts don't think so. At the end of the day, what makes Talon so strong is his ability to wave clear and roam in the laning phase, along with insane mobility and single target damage. This nerf doesn't hit any of these strengths, so sure, now Talon will be a bit weaker into those hard counter matchups, but in general, he should still excel at what he's best at, so we'll be keeping him in the OP tier for now. Syndra is also receiving a nerf, with her E cooldown being increased by a flat 2 seconds at all ranks. On one hand, this will give her opponents more time to punish her after she misses her stun. On the other hand, she's still keeping all of her damage needed to one-shot opponents when she does land her stun. This nerf is definitely aimed towards the pro scene and challenger play where she is most dominant. This is a tough one to call as we think she'll be just on the cusp of dropping into the A tier. However, we'll be playing it safe and keeping Syndra at the bottom of the S tier for now. Jumping into the tier list, there are quite a few changes. Katarina is back in the OP tier. It looks like the nerfs to her damage last patch simply weren't enough. You'll also see a couple of new faces rising the ranks, with Pike and Galio entering into the S tier. Pike is a bit of a weird one. Despite having no direct buffs, his win rate has been steadily climbing in mid lane the last few patches. This is likely due to repeated nerfs to the top picks in mid lane, making him stronger in comparison. Pike mid is similar to Talon in how roaming strategies are super dominant in solo queue. One of the key differences though is that Pike doesn't really need items to be impactful due to how his ult functions as an execute. Galio on the other hand did see direct buffs on previous patches, the biggest one being that his ultimate will now grant a magic shield to all allied champions within the area. This buff alone resulted in his win rate spiking 4% up to 52% from 48% on the very next patch. So keep your eyes peeled for these two champions as they're starting to emerge as strong picks in the meta. Moving on to our low elo recommendations, we have Fizz, Talon, Pike, Annie, and middlesticks. Fizz, Talon, and Pike all represent low elo solo queue stompers who will snowball out of control with any sort of lead. Annie, on the other hand, is a more beginner-friendly champion to play if you just want to focus on mastering the fundamentals of mid lane. Fiddlesticks is a powerful lane bully because of his reliable poke. Then, when it comes to the late game, he can easily 1v5 fights, especially against noobs who don't ward. For bans, we recommend Wukong, Katarina, Diana, and Fizz this patch. These not only represent the strongest champions this patch, but also have the highest pick rate, kiting into the AD carry tier list. Now, we won't be going over the changes again as we did at the start of the guide, so make sure you check them out if you missed them. There are an absolute ton of changes to the AD carry tier list this patch. Miss Fortune has finally dropped out of the OP tier, and in her place, we have Vayne, Ezreal, and Caitlyn. Vayne and Caitlyn are sitting at the top with very similar stats, a 52% average win rate and a 60% win rate for players that master them. Ezreal, on the other hand, can seem weaker if you only look at his win rate, averaging at 50% and 58% for those that master him. However, you have to keep in mind that his win rate is being massively dragged down by his absurd pick rate of 32%. This is more than double that of the second highest picked champion, Caitlyn, at 15%. With so many less skilled players picking Ezreal into any sort of comp, it will lower his average win rate as a side effect, so he's much stronger than he appears. The other pick that you want to be on the lookout for this patch is Caixa. With her being double buffed, it's very hard to predict just how powerful she could be, so she's a bit of a wild card and definitely has a lot of potential to burst back into the meta. For low elo picks this patch, we recommend Ashe, Caitlyn, Twitch, and Caixa. Ashe and Caitlyn are the safer picks with their high auto attack range, whereas Twitch and Caixa are solo queue stompers with their crazy snowball and carry potential. For bans, we recommend Caitlyn, Vayne, and Ezreal. Not only are they the strongest picks this patch, they also have a much higher pick rate than anyone else. Gliding into the support changes, we have a nerf to Janna. Her W damage is being lowered by 20 at max rank. A nerf to Janna does make sense given the fact that she's been topping the charts with a 53% average win rate and 59% for players that master her. But don't fret you Janna mains out there, as there are actually a lot of good things about this nerf. Firstly, Janna doesn't always max W. That's typically reserved for when she's snowballing hard in lane, so these damage nerfs won't kick in if you aren't maxing W. Secondly, with the power level of AD carries increasing, there's a very good chance Janna players will be switching to maxing E first to boost their strength further. And lastly, again, with AD carries now being more powerful, the support meta is definitely going to shift into enchanter supports like Janna who can protect them. For all these reasons, we'll be keeping Janna in the OP tier for this patch. Jumping into the tier list, and for the first time in a long time, the OP category is looking different. Bard, Blitzcrank, Yuumi, Lulu, and Janna take the top slot, while Nautilus and Leona have finally dropped down to the S tier. Now, some may be surprised to find Bard back in the OP tier as he recently got nerfed. Despite this though, he's bounced back and has one of the highest average win rates at 53%. You'll also see a ton of enchanter supports entering into the OP tier with Yuumi, Lulu, and Janna. Here's the thing, these champions already had high win rates and were on the rise prior to the changes to AD carries. Now, with ADCs being more powerful, it's only natural for the support meta to shift into enchanter supports that can protect them and help them scale into the late game. I'm sure some of you are wondering why Blitzcrank was the one that survived to stay in the OP bracket. Well, it makes sense if you actually think about it. Leona and Nautilus are engaging supports that have to actually get on top of the target. With a rise in enchanter supports that specialize in disengaging, you can see how it would make them weaker. However, Blitzcrank is unique in that he can pull a target toward him, not allowing the enchanter support to kite back and disengage, and this is why he'll remain in the OP tier for this patch. For our low elo picks this patch, we recommend Blitzcrank, Bard, and Lulu. Each one of these champions represents a unique support playstyle. Blitzcrank is the best choice for engaging, Bard is the roamer, and Lulu is about protecting the ADC. Miss Fortune is a tougher one to explain our reasoning, but watch our most OP picks guide if you want to know why we've put her here and how to play her. For bans, we recommend Yuumi, Lulu, and Blitzcrank. You could also add Janna in if you're facing her too much, but given that she's receiving a nerf, that usually causes a champion's pick rate to drop. Alright, moving on to the real reason that you're here, the skins for this patch. A Volibear skin, the 1000 Pierce Bear, will be released this patch and will be free to any players that own or has purchased Volibear during patch 10.11 and will be 975 RP afterwards. On top of this, Riot will be releasing 3 new additions to the Astronaut skin line for Bard, Gnar, and Poppy, each for 1350 RP. I have to say, for a free skin, the Volibear 1000 Pierce Bear looks fantastic and you should definitely pick it up while you can. In terms of the Astronaut skin line, my favorite has to be Gnar as he turns into a green space monster. But to be honest, the other skins are pretty cool as well. Riot has really knocked it out of the park with this patch's skin releases. Alright, we here at skillcapped put a ton of work into our tier list, and the best way for you to show your love and support is to like, subscribe, leave a comment, and share this video. Remember, the content you find on our YouTube channel is just a taste of the hyper improvement platform you'll find on our website. If you're serious about improving and want to rank up, there's no better time than now to go to skillcapped.com, link in the description below. If you want to know more about our absolute best slow elo picks on this patch, then be sure to check out this video. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.